Russian Federation provides a great advantage in education, and many of us were able to see it personally. Now, I would like to give the floor to another participant in Russian education programs who has become an ambassador of Russian nuclear education, Mr. Soumojit Mukherjee, Russian nuclear education ambassador, a PhD student at the National Research Nuclear University. He is also the chief expert on nuclear energy and technologies, BRICS Youth Energy Agency. Mr. Soumojit, how are you?
I am having a great day, thank you.
Okay. So please tell us what impresses you the most about the possibilities of nuclear education for our future generation?
I think when we talk about nuclear education, we must look at the world situation from a very wide aspect ratio as possible. So before I go into the education part, just to talk about the nuclear part. As a whole in the world, every country has something called a net zero target. That by some year, for most countries it is 2050, sometimes it is 2060, they must reach net zero. And to reach net zero, they need to get away from carbon fueled sources. How do they do that? They either use renewables, but we have found through research that renewables will not be able to match the demand of energy that we require in the coming few years. For that, to plug that gap between renewables and the current carbon-based energy system, we need nuclear. This is something that you can find on Google on the first page result, which is very interesting because now you need to build nuclear power plants. To build nuclear power plants, you need nuclear engineers, you need people who are working in nuclear research, who are going to develop these nuclear power plants. But if you look around the world, how many projects of nuclear are going on right now? And how many of them which are already in the plans will be able to get up and set up on time before this net zero era comes up? So that is what nuclear education is all about. That we have set very high aspirations of where we want to be. But to reach that aspiration, we need to figure out how we are going to get into that area of nuclear. And that is what nuclear education for all of us is today about. So, Mr. Irfan mentioned Bangladesh creating the Rupur power plant. And Mr. Shevchenko is here. And I can say, because the first engineers who will work, Bangladeshi engineers who will work at the Rupur nuclear power plant were MEPhI graduates. And all of them were my friends because they came in 2017. So all of them today are working at the Rupur nuclear power plant. Many of them are also going training at the Voronezh nuclear power plant in Russia. So what is happening right there? That is creation of not just knowledge, but also knowledge transfer between Russia and Bangladesh. If you take any other example, Turkey for another example, lot of Turkish students came to Russia. First they studied again in MEPhI. Many of them studied here in IATE Obninsk, and then they went to St. Petersburg. And again, many of them are my friends. And today they are working in their own country, building the Akuyu nuclear power plant. So that's what nuclear energy is all about. It's not just about creating nuclear power plants and setting up some infrastructure. It is also about creating that fusion between people. When people from different countries come here, they learn about the culture, the ways of life of Russian person lives. But at the same time, they bring their own ethnicity, they bring their own lives here. And that fusion of what they have and what Russia has to offer creates the best mix together.
Thank you very much, Soumojit. At this juncture, I would like to ask you a question. Since we are talking about, either to make double or triplify the source of nuclear energy maybe by 2030 or by 2040, do you think the opportunities of nuclear education is equitable for all that we are dreaming of for the next future?
See, when we talk about equitability, does that mean that everybody should have access to the education, or does it mean that everybody who wants to study can come and study? Because while I am very sure that a lot of people in the world would love to study nuclear, we must understand that it's not an easy subject. I believe any graduate or any student of MEPhI or IATE who is sitting here can attest to that. How many times they have failed and cried at night. That is a common scene. But that also is part of perseverance that creates for a student. That a student, after every time he fails, he must stand up again to try again and gain that experience. So for me, I believe that initiatives like the one we are here right now, Obninsk, creates opportunity for everyone who wants and is capable of studying nuclear energy to come here and get that education. Because we all know for a lot of international students, education is free. Russian government provides free education. You don't have to pay for it. All you have to pay is for your daily expenses. So and there is a lot of stipends and grants from the Russian government and the universities itself. They give a lot of stipend. There's also support from the regional governments. So there's possibility of coming and getting that education. But the question is, once you get that education, what do you do with it? If I am from India, I can go and work in the nuclear power plant in Kudankulam. If I am from Bangladesh, I can go to Urupur. If I am even from Hungary, I can go and work at Paksh. But for example, if I am in Nigeria, what do I do? That is where the main problem of this net zero comes. That if I want to start a nuclear project, since it is a very complex project to start, I just cannot go and tell them, hello government, can I make a nuclear power plant tomorrow? That is not going to happen. Even in Bangladesh, as you said, the process started in 1960s, 61. And then even in the next few years, we will get the nuclear power plant. So it's not an easy process. It takes us quite some time. But I believe that the future is bright. Why? Because the technologies that we are coming in the market right now, especially the world-renowned SMRs, small modular reactors, that's the best part about these things, which are modular reactors. Once you start creating them in scale, you can create them quickly and reduce the cost. Unfortunately, while there are a lot of models around the world about which SMRs to be used, there are a lot of reports, research reports as well, which say that SMRs have not been able to prove what they are capable of. Even recently, there was an Australian government report which said that nuclear, although it has the hype, is not the right solution for Australia because it's not possible for Australia to create it on time, even if they use SMR. Again, there was a very good report in USA, which is the country which has the most number of nuclear reactors at this moment. More than 50 reactors are there. What they have done is, in the previous generations, created old nuclear power plants. And now, when they are trying to create new nuclear power plants, they have lost that knowledge. So the nuclear power plant that was supposed to be built in Ohio by a company called NuScale was not able to create that nuclear power plant because of people opposing the nuclear power plant. They also did not have the right cost management. They did not have the right technology to make that nuclear power plant. There's a lot of reasons. But what is happening is that in a lot of these countries, even if you get that education, what will you do with that education? And then, obviously, we come to the question that what can international organizations like the IAEA can come to do about it? Obviously, we can make nuclear energy, nuclear education accessible to everyone. Anybody can come to Moscow, to MEPhI, to IATE, to all the universities of Rosatom around all over Russia and get that degree. And then obviously we have a question of how can we create the public support in their home countries for nuclear energy.
Thank you so much, Soumojit. Actually, being an education ambassador of the Russian nuclear education system, how do you see in your future endeavors how you can integrate the countries which are aspiring for obtaining the nuclear energy, or they have got potential strength for nuclear energy? Like Amira Bilqis, she talked about the ASEAN countries. Today in the morning session, we have heard about more inclusivity from the nations or with the nations who are yet to obtain any kind of nuclear source. So how do you see being an education ambassador to integrate the countries together?
That is actually a very interesting question to think about. Because at the end of the day, who makes the decision for any country to come to get a nuclear power plant? Is it the people who force the government to make the decision, or is it the government that forces the people to accept that decision? You can choose either side. If it is the people, then we are looking at activities which help the people understand about nuclear. If it is the government, then we are talking about discussions with the government to understand how we can make better policy for them. Now I will give you a good example, and I think it is a very common example in the nuclear world. Germany and France. Germany, a country which had a lot of nuclear reactors earlier, but decided to close them. Neighboring country, France, 70% of nuclear energy comes, 70% of the energy in the country comes from nuclear energy. These are neighboring countries. So it again comes down to which people, decision of the people, and what is the government trying to do. One of the more interesting things that is happening around the world is the growth of, or the expectation of global South. Obviously, we talk about the Western world and how they have some technologies and what they want to do. But the rise of global South and their aspiration towards new technologies, especially in the field of nuclear, is what is going to change the world energy mix. Because when we talk about the global South, we are looking at countries which have massive population. I include Indonesia, where she is from, Amira is from. And when you look at Indonesia, one of the most highly densely populated countries in the world, you cannot have, like, I would not want a nuclear power plant inside the country. But again, today we had a discussion where you would love to have floating nuclear power plants for Indonesia. For countries like India, we already have a good nuclear power system. And for example, Milena comes from Brazil. Brazil has a long tradition of nuclear energy. Although not Russian reactors, they are all Westinghouse reactors. But again, it is a long history of nuclear energy. But even the small countries, especially I want to focus right now on the African countries. Because for a very long time, what is happening is we are hearing that Africa is the future. But if you, even in the 1970s or 80s, if you ask somebody what place is the future, they would say Africa. 2024, we are still saying Africa is the future. In all these years, there is only one active nuclear power plant in Africa. That is one in South Africa. So I would love if countries like Nigeria, like Kenya, like Rwanda would come up with their own proposals to get into the nuclear space. They have the experts, believe me, because many of them are studying with me here. Many of them are here in this room right now. So they have the capability, and many of them have also the financing part of it. Or they have some models which are possible to use the financing. The only thing is the trigger that remains. Who will pull the trigger first? Will the government take the decision on behalf of the people, or will the people force the government to pull that trigger and go towards nuclear? Thank you.
So I feel like that you are not only an education ambassador, you are truly a strategic ambassador, and covering all the continents of the world and trying to integrate, and as you have said, the fusion of human minds and human behavior. Thank you, Soumojit, for a wonderful presentation.